I titled my talk today, The Magic of Women in Film. But at the risk of standing here and sounding presumptuous, calling myself magic, I'll actually tell you that it's about how my perceptions of women in film were completely changed by one woman here in Guatemala. I work in film. I work as a digital colorist. People say, "You what? You color?" And I do. My grandma thinks that I take black and white films and color them in, kind of like The Wizard of Oz. And some days I feel like The Wizard of Oz when I can bring out the light and beauty in a film, kind of like this. But if you're not looking, you might actually never see the work of a colorist. You might just think, I love this film. I love the way it makes me feel. I love the way I feel like I'm living in this moment, in this story, but I'm not sure why. Now, being a colorist is not always about making things look pretty. Sometimes it's about making them look dark or scary or intense or even really hard to look at. Because that's a powerful emotion too. And it's these emotions that my work resides. It's about bringing just the amount of light and just that deepness in the shadows, just a little bit of blue, maybe some softness, a little right amount of clarity to help the audience feel how I feel. My job is very technical. It happens in front of a big computer, in the dark, often all by myself. But it builds on the elements of storytelling. It builds on the tactical elements of where a film was shot, what the location was like, what the light looked like that day, how the actors felt, and how the props coordinated with the costumes. It also builds on the storytelling elements of time and place. A film that's set on a dusky night in the 70s is going to look completely different from a bold, punchy action film or a cold, maybe kind of hard and dark future. All of these films have different stories of color. On my best day, I feel like I can create a whole world. And on my worst day, it's about that guy in the bright yellow shirt that was walking in the back of the shot, and his yellow shirt says, "I love cheeseburgers," and someone's asking me, "Can you make that go away? Can you tone that down a little bit?" And I do that too. Now, in the past couple years, the phrase women in film has become very important, and people have fought to bring that awareness up. It's part of a bigger movement to allow and encourage and support a wider diversity of voices in the films and the media that we're consuming more and more every day. And this idea is really powerful. It's not only about the voices and the stories that we see in the media, but it's also about the people behind the camera. It's the people who are the writers, the directors, the cinematographers, the colorists, who are sometimes the lens through which we see and hear the stories. And those voices make a big difference. And I've always thought there was something extra magical about the idea women in film, but I've never quite known what. A few years ago, my colleagues brought a project to me. It was an extension of a piece they had filmed years ago here in Guatemala, in a small village of Peña Blanca, above Lake Atitlan. There, they had met a young woman whose dream was to be a nurse and to start a pharmacy in her village. This woman's name was Rosa, and she was just about to graduate high school and take that next step in her journey. My colleagues asked me if I would help co-direct this film to bring a woman's perspective to that lens. And I thought, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. This is a woman's story that needs another woman to help understand and listen to. This is women in film. This is going to be great. This is going to be magic. And so we started planning for the shoot, and I started thinking about the colors of Guatemala. I thought about that deep blue of the lake and the way it shimmers when you look down at it from above. I thought about the green of the trees as they rise up the hills on all the sides, about the purples and the reds of the women's blouses and the beautiful embroidery on them and how delicate it was. I thought about how, while the colors here are more vibrant than I've ever seen, there's a bit of this duskiness and heaviness in the air as well. They're not so bright and bouncy. They're sometimes a little bit soft, a little bit serious. And I thought, I'm going to capture all these colors, and this is going to be great. This is going to be magic. We also started thinking about the storyline of Rosa, and the biggest thing I thought of was, this is about this Rosa, but there are so many Rosas. Rosas who are little girls, Rosas who are older women. The Rosas are someone who's gone through something really hard, and yet they still have dreams, and they still fight. And they're these strong, powerful women. And I thought maybe just this Rosa's story would be a little beacon of light in that you can keep fighting and you can find your dreams. You can pursue them. And I thought, this is going to be great. This is going to be magic. And so we had the cameras and the story and the colors all planned out, and we came here to Guatemala. We rode the truck up the hills, and Rosa's mother and her father, they welcomed us into our home, and Rosa gave me a big hug. And then the day of graduation came, and we all dressed up. We all put on our Sunday clothes, and we got in the truck, and we were heading down the mountain to the church in Panachal. And next to me was standing Rosa, and she was wearing these beautiful new shoes. And this warm breeze was flowing, and it brushed through my hair. And I looked over, and it was whipping through her hair too. And I thought, this is the magic. Graduation. We were there and watching Rosa walk down the aisle to receive her diploma on this next step to achieve her dream. Her mother was there to give her a big hug and to pull her into her arms and to put that special graduation ring on her finger. And it was one of the most beautiful moments I've ever seen. And I thought, this woman's story is so inspiring. This woman's story is great. Over the next few days, we filmed Rosa at home and at school and at the clinic she was working at, where she was already helping women understand their health needs and where they could go to get help. She was already welcoming people and especially connecting to the women in her community. And it was great to see. And then we had this final interview that we were going to shoot. And it was going to be this interview that tied everything together. And so we found the location and we got the camera set up and lit the scene, and Rosa sat down. And I sat across from her. And I had all these questions. What was your favorite toy growing up? When did you know you first wanted to be a nurse? What did it feel like to walk down that aisle and know you had taken the next step in accomplishing this thing that you had sought out? And Rosa looked right at me. She looked right at the camera. And she started talking. And she told me about how she grew up poor and her family didn't have money for toys or dolls. About how she was pulled out of school when she was young to take care of her brothers. She talked about how she was sent off to the city and she was just 14 to help earn money for the family. And she talked really softly about how when she was there, someone she thought was a friend had taken advantage of her, and she had become pregnant and had to come home and to face her family in that moment. And then her eyes kind of lit up, and she talked about how she wanted to have this baby no matter what. And I just sat there and I listened. And she talked about how her daughter was finally born, and her daughter had hydrocephalus, which is an issue of swelling of the brain that's filled with water. And about how every day she held her daughter in her arms, even though she became heavy and her arms were weak. And about the day her daughter first smiled and she thought, maybe everything will be okay. And then about the day that her daughter passed away at not even 3 years old. And the tears ran down her face, and they ran down mine too. And I looked at her and I thought, this is not a story with scenes and color that can be digitally altered. This is life, and it's hard, and it hurts. This is not great. This is not magic. And then a couple days later, we left. We did come home, and we created a story, a film about Rosa that was moving and powerful and inspiring. And I did color it, and when I colored it, I saw those beautiful colors of Guatemala. I saw the blue of the lake and the green of the trees and the red of Rosa's mother's dress. And yet they were still hard, and it still hurt. I showed this film to Rosa, and she changed a couple things, and then she said, this is my story, and I want to tell it. I have never met someone so brave. So the short film, Rosa, These Storms, premiered at a major U.S. film festival. It screened at festivals all over the country, and when we put it online, people watched it all over the world. And people started writing in, and they said, I'm a Rosa. And they said, my mom is a Rosa, or my daughter, or my cousin. And I thought, maybe this is great. Maybe this one woman who had the courage to tell her story that's meant so much to all these other people, maybe this is great. One festival asked if Rosa herself would come and speak. And we thought, if she wants to, and she did, and she applied for a passport, and she flew on a plane, and she came to Washington, D.C., in the United States. And Rosa stood up there in front of all these people, and she held her head high, and she said, no matter what storms we face in life, we can all grow wings like the birds and fly. And I stood up there next to her, and I looked at this tiny, inspiring Mayan woman next to me, and they were beautiful new shoes. And I thought, there's this space in my chest that is always going to hurt for what she's been through, and yet always feels her courage and her light as well. And I looked up at these credits scrolling through the screen, and I thought, it's not about the scenes, it's not about the storyline, it's definitely not about the colors. It's about this woman's story, and it's her voice that spoke up above everything that mattered. And I don't know, maybe that's the magic. Gracias.